2:13 a.m. Chicago General, the quietest part of the night and the quietest part of the hospital. The long-term care wing. Here, the hum of machinery is the only conversation, and the slow, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor is the only music. Most nights, it's a peaceful vigil. Tonight is different. My name is Sarah, and I've been a night nurse for 7 years. You get used to the shadows, the strange noises. Old buildings like this one groan and settle. Patients talk in their sleep, but you also develop a sixth sense, a gut feeling when something is off. And tonight, my gut is screaming. It started subtly. A call light from room 307. Old Mr. Abernathy. I walked down the hall, the squeak of my sneakers echoing in the silence. But when I got to his room, he was sound asleep, breathing peacefully. The call light on his bedside table was off. I reset it at the nursing station, chalking it up to a classic electrical glitch. But a few minutes later, it happened again. Room 37. And again, he was fast asleep. Then the whispers started. Faint, like a radio playing in another room, too low to make out the words. I checked the staff lounge, the break room. Empty. I walked the entire length of the hallway, listening at every door. Nothing but the gentle snores of my patients. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a cold, sibilant sound, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. The air grew heavy, thick with a chill that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The main hallway lights, which are always on, began to flicker. Not a random, faulty bulb flicker, but a slow, rhythmic pulse. On, off, on, off, on, on, like the building itself was taking a slow, deep breath. I called maintenance. The phone line was dead. Just static. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the hall, where the corridor turns toward the old, unused surgical ward, a shadow detached itself from the wall. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was darker than the surrounding darkness, a void in the shape of a person, tall and unnaturally thin. It didn't walk. It glided, moving without a sound, without disturbing a single mote of dust in the air. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to get out. But my patients, I couldn't leave them. I ducked behind the counter of the nursing station, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. No signal, of course. I was completely alone. The whispering grew louder, clearer. It wasn't one voice, but many. A chorus of faint, overlapping murmurs. They were saying a name. My name. Sarah. Sarah, over and over. The sound was coming from the vents, from the speakers in the ceiling, from the very walls around me. The flickering lights stopped. Everything was plunged into near darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the computer monitors and the green exit sign at the far end of the hall. The gliding shadow was closer now, halfway down the corridor. I could see its form a little better. No face, no features, just a silhouette that seemed to drink the light around it. A wheelchair, parked against the wall, suddenly rolled out into the middle of the hall and spun in a slow circle. Then another. Then the gurney by the elevator doors began to rock back and forth, its wheels squealing in protest. The rhythmic beeping from the monitors at my station began to speed up, one by one, faster and faster. A frantic, syncopated orchestra of terror. The shadow figures stopped. It was right in front of the nursing station now, just on the other side of the counter. The air was ice cold. I could see my breath misting in front of my face. The chorus of whispers ceased, replaced by a single, low voice that seemed to speak directly inside my head. It wasn't a sound heard with ears, but a thought forced into my mind. We've been waiting for you. I risked a peek over the counter. There was nothing there. The hallway was empty. The gurney and wheelchairs were still. The lights were back on, steady and bright. The monitors were beeping in their normal, steady rhythm. Room 307's call light was on. I'm recording this now, whispering into my phone's voice memo app. I don't know if it's over. I don't know if I'm going crazy. The sun will be up in a few hours. The day shift will come in, laughing and sipping coffee, and this will all feel like a bad dream. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Something is awake in Chicago, General. And I think it wants to play. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't forget to lock your doors. Thanks for listening. The heart monitor screamed, a single, piercing tone cutting through the sterile quiet of the ICU code blue. The team swarmed in, a blur of scrubs and urgent, clipped phrases. They worked on Mr. Harrison, an elderly man with a heart as tired as his weary eyes. They pushed epi, they started compressions, their movements a frantic, desperate dance against death. But the line on the monitor remained stubbornly, tragically flat. The attending physician, Dr. Evans, a man whose face was etched with the stress of 1,000 such moments, finally called it. Time of death, 11:42 p.m. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the quiet hum of machines that had failed to do their job. The team began to disperse, their shoulders slumped in defeat. That's when it happened. A voice, calm and clear as a bell, cut through the somber atmosphere. Clear. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't frantic. It was a statement of fact, spoken with an authority that made everyone freeze. Dr. Evans, who was halfway to the door, turned. The nurses looked at each other, confusion clouding their tired faces. Wu sighed. No one had a hand on the defibrillator pedals. In fact, the machine was already being wheeled away. Then, a single, sharp jolt seemed to pass through Mr. Harrison's still body. It was a convulsion, so slight, it was almost imperceptible. And on the monitor, a miracle. A blip, then another. A slow, steady rhythm began to form. Weak, but undeniable. Beep, beep, beep. Life. The team stared, mouths agape. Dr. Evans rushed back to the bedside, his professional composure completely shattered. He checked for a pulse. It was there, thready, but present. Mr. Harris's eyelids fluttered. In the ensuing chaos of frantic checks, the jubilant disbelief, the rewriting of reports, a crucial question went unanswered. Who was she? Later, as they reviewed the security footage, they saw nothing. The camera showed the medical team working, 10 stopping. It showed them turning in unison, as if hearing something, but there was no one else in the room. No mysterious woman in white, no angelic figure, no extra nurse that hadn't been accounted for. Mr. Harrison made a full recovery. When he was strong enough to speak, he told a wide-eyed nurse about a dream he'd had. He said he was walking down a long, dark tunnel toward a light, but just as he was about to reach it, a woman's hand gently pushed him back. He couldn't see her face, but he remembered her voice, soft and reassuring. "It's not your time," she had told him. The staff at St. Jude's Hospital still talk about it in hushed tones. They call her the whisper of the ward. Some of the older nurses say they've heard stories like this before, passed down through generations of staff tales, of unexplained recoveries, of a phantom caregiver who appears only when all hope is lost. Was it a collective auditory hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion? A shared moment of wishful thinking that somehow willed a man back to life? Or was it something more? Something that defies medical science and rational explanation? We may never know. But for Mr. Harrison and the team that night, the proof was in the steady, rhythmic beat of a heart that had, for all intents and purposes, stopped forever. Some things, it seems, are not meant to be understood, only witnessed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more mysteries. The night shift at St. Jude's Hospital has its own rhythm, a quiet hum of machines and hushed conversations. But lately, a different kind of story has been making the rounds, whispered in break rooms and over late-night coffee. It started with the patients on the 3rd floor, the long-term recovery ward. Old Mr. Henderson was the first. He told his daughter about a wonderfully kind nurse who checked on him just before dawn. She had this incredibly gentle touch, he said, and her presence was so calming. But when his daughter asked for her name to send a thank you note, he couldn't remember seeing a badge. Just a plain, crisp, white uniform and the kindest eyes. A week later, a young woman recovering from a major car accident. Maria mentioned the same thing. She'd been struggling with pain, unable to sleep, when a nurse came in. She didn't say much, just adjusted her pillow, smoothed her blanket, and held her hand for a moment. The pain seemed to melt away. Maria described her perfectly. White scrubs, dark hair, tied back neatly, and a serene smile. Again, no name badge. She just appeared when she was needed most and vanished before the morning shift change. The stories started to pile up. A child in pediatrics who was scared of the dark said a nice lady in white sat with him until he fell asleep. A man in the cardiac unit swore a nurse saved him, noticing his heart rate dipping on the monitor before any alarms went off. He said she was there in a flash, her calm voice reassuring him as she alerted the crash team. By the time they arrived, she was gone. The regular nurses were baffled. They compared notes. No one on staff matched the description. They checked the schedules, the agency logs, even security footage. Nothing. The cameras on the third floor would mysteriously glitch or show an empty hallway right around the time the ghost nurse was said to have made her rounds. Dr. Evans, the head of the ward, was a man of science and skepticism. He dismissed it as a combination of medication-induced confusion and hospital folklore, but even he couldn't ignore the sheer consistency of the reports. One night, a veteran nurse named Carol decided to do some digging. She'd worked at St. Jude's for over 30 years and had heard her fair share of strange tales. She went down to the hospital archives, a dusty basement room filled with old records and forgotten history. Poring over faded yearbooks and personnel files from decades past, she finally found it. A black and white photo from the 1950s showed a group of nursing graduates. And there she was, the same kind eyes, the same serene smile. Her name was Ellen Evans. The file was thin. Eleanor had been a promising young nurse, beloved by patients and colleagues for her compassion. She worked tirelessly, often taking extra shifts. One stormy night, after finishing a double shift, she was driving home and was killed in a tragic accident. She had just left the third floor. The date of her death was 50 years ago, to the day. Carol felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a story. Eleanor had never truly left her post. Back on the ward, the whispers continued, but now they were tinged with a sense of wonder and gratitude instead of fear. The staff stopped trying to find her on the security cameras. They knew she wasn't there to be seen, only to be. Only Toby. The ghost nurse of St. Jude's wasn't a terrifying spirit. She was a guardian angel in white, still making her rounds, her gentle hands still bringing comfort in the darkest hours of the night. A silent promise, kept for half a century, to care for those in need. So if you're ever at St. Jude's and feel a comforting presence, you might just have been visited by Nurse Eleanor. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries. The new intern, Alex, seemed to fit in perfectly. Bright, eager, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. He even remembered everyone's coffee order. But there was one person he seemed particularly interested in, a name he'd mention in passing conversations. Emily Carter. He'd ask if anyone knew her, what department she worked in, if she was still with the company. Most people just shrugged, the name not ringing any bells in a company this large. One rainy Tuesday, our HR manager, Sarah, was doing a routine data cleanup. Old employee files, access logs, that sort of thing. She typed Alex's name into the system, just to make sure his onboarding paperwork was all in order. Everything looked fine. Then, out of curiosity, she typed in Emily Carter. The search took a moment longer than usual. Then a single file popped up. Status: terminated. Resignation date: 2 years ago. Sarah frowned. That was odd. Alex had spoken about her like she was a current employee. She clicked to view more details. All the standard information was there. Start date, end date, final salary. But when she got to the badge number section, it was blank. Not just blank, but the field itself seemed corrupted. A string of error characters appeared where a number should have been. Sarah tried searching the access logs using Emily's old employee ID. No results. It was like the system had not only deleted her badge number but scrubbed any record of it ever existing. A digital ghost. This went beyond standard procedure for an employee who had resigned. Data wasn't just archived. It was gone. Later that day, Sarah was chatting with Mark from IT by the coffee machine. She casually brought up the weird file issue. Mark laughed it off. At first, probably just a server glitch. Sarah, we had a big migration about 2 years back. Some legacy data got scrambled, but Sarah pressed, could a whole badge number and all its associated logs just vanish? Mark's smile faded. Vanish? No. It could be corrupted, maybe archived improperly, but to be completely gone from every log. That's not a glitch. That's a deliberate, high-level wipe. You'd need top-tier admin privileges to do something like that. Why do you ask? Sarah just shook her head, saying it was nothing, but her mind was racing. A routine resignation doesn't require a digital ghosting. Her investigation took her to the physical archives in the basement, a place no one had visited in years. Dust motes danced in the beam of her phone's flashlight. She found the box for terminated employees from 2 years ago. It was heavy, filled with thick manila folders. She flipped through them. Carson, Castillo, Jane, and Batno Carter. The file was missing. Not just the digital record, but the physical one too. It wasn't just a glitch. Someone had intentionally erased Emily Carter from the company's memory. Back at her desk, she saw Alex walking by, whistling a cheerful tune. He gave her a friendly wave. Sarah forced a smile, but a cold dread washed over her. Why was he so interested in a woman who, for all intents and purposes, no longer existed? What did he know? And more importantly, who was Emily Carter? And why did someone go to such extreme lengths to make it seem like she was never here at all? The mystery was no longer about a missing file. It was about a missing person. And the cheerful new intern might be the key to it all. Thanks for watching. If you're hooked on this mystery, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of the story. Let me know your theories in the comments below. Smoke fills the ICU. Alarms fail. Panic spreads. Cameras catch a blurred nurse, moving fast. The sirens screamed, but their wail was almost lost in the roar. Smoke, thick and black, choked the air, turning the once sterile hospital corridor into a vision of chaos. Alarms blared a frantic, unending rhythm. Ash and glowing embers drifted down like a hellish snowfall. Through it all, one figure moved with purpose. Nurse Emily, her uniform already smudged with soot, herded a small group of coughing, terrified patients towards the exit sign. A faint green promise in the swirling darkness. Her voice, though strained, cut through the noise, a beacon of calm in the storm. Stay together. We're almost there. Just a few more steps. She pushed the last of her group into the arms of waiting firefighters, and then, without a moment's hesitation, turned back. The heat was a physical blow. The smoke, a suffocating blanket. Tying a damp cloth over her mouth and nose, she plunged deeper into the inferno. The shouts of "stay back" were lost to the wind. She had a count in her head, a mental checklist of every soul on her floor. One was still missing. Mr. Henderson. Room 3 beat her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a prayer. She fought her way down hallways that were barely recognizable, paint blistering off the walls and ceiling tiles crashing down. The smoke was so thick now she could barely see her own hands. Guided by memory and sheer will, she found room 3B. The doorway was a frame of hungry, licking flames, and there, in the far corner, was Mr. Henderson, slumped in his wheelchair, his face a mask of terror and resignation. He was trapped. The fire was closing in, sealing the only way out. For a split second, fear paralyzed her. The roar of the fire was deafening, the heat searing. But then she saw the fear in Mr. Henderson's eyes, and something inside her shifted. Adrenaline, fierce and pure, surged through her veins. "Mr. Henderson, I'm here. I'm going to get you out." Her voice was a raw shout. She kicked a fallen piece of debris out of her path and rushed to his side. The fire at the door seemed to lunge at them. With strength she didn't know she possessed, she gripped the handles of the heavy wheelchair and pulled. The journey back was a blur of instinct and desperation. She navigated the collapsing hallway, weaving around fallen beams and dodging sparks. The wheelchair's wheels caught on debris, and she threw her whole body into pushing it forward. The smoke burned her lungs, Her eyes streamed, but she never stopped. She could feel the fire at her back, a hot breath on her neck. Finally, she saw the hazy silhouette of the exit, the beautiful, chaotic scene of the safe zone outside. With one last agonizing push, she shoved the wheelchair through the doors and into the cool night air. Mr. Henderson coughed, his breath rattling, but he was alive. He was safe. He turned to look at her, his eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it was heartbreaking. A weak smile touched his lips. Relief, pure and overwhelming, should have washed over Emily. She had done it. She had saved him. But as she looked at his face, her own expression began to change. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a grim, steely determination. Her gaze lifted from the survivor beside her and fixed on the burning building, now a monstrous torch against the night sky. "You did it. You're a hero," someone shouted from the crowd of survivors. "Don't go back," another voice pleaded. But Emily wasn't listening. Her jaw was set, her eyes narrowed. There were other floors, other wings, other nurses, other patients. Without a word, she turned away from the safety she had fought so hard to reach, ignoring the desperate calls of the people she had just saved. She broke into a run, her soot-streaked form sprinting directly back toward the inferno. And then, she was gone, swallowed by the smoke and the flames, a lone hero returning to the heart of the fire. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please like and subscribe for more content that celebrates the courage within us all. In the sterile silence of St. Jude's recently reopened intensive care unit, something was wrong. A whisper had turned into a murmur into a chilling consensus. Investigators Miller and Evans were called in, not for a crime scene, but for a ghost story. Seasoned detectives, they'd seen it all, but this was different. Staff spoke in hushed tones of a nurse, a gentle presence who would appear at the bedsides of the most critical patients, offering a word of comfort or a calming touch, only to vanish into thin air the moment she was addressed directly. They called her the guardian angel of the ICU, but her appearances were becoming more frequent, more unsettling. Miller ever, the skeptic, and Evans, the more open-minded of the two, began their investigation, stepping into a world where logic and the supernatural were about to collide. Their first day was a blur of interviews. A junior nurse, her hands trembling, recounted seeing a woman in an old-style uniform adjusting a patient's blanket. When she called out, the figure simply faded away. A veteran doctor admitted he'd felt a calming presence during a particularly difficult procedure, a sense of being guided by an unseen hand. The descriptions were always the same: a kind face, compassionate eyes, and an aura of profound peace. Every witness, without fail, said she looked just like a nurse who used to work there, a woman named Emily. The name hung in the air, a key to a lock no one could find. They turned to the security footage, hoping for a flicker, a shadow, anything tangible. But every time a sighting was reported, the cameras in that exact spot would show nothing but a brief, inexplicable burst of digital static. It was as if the technology itself refused to acknowledge her existence. Frustrated, Miller and Evans focused on tracking down Emily. This, they thought, would be the easy part. They were wrong. Her employment records were strangely incomplete. Her last known address was an empty lot. Her personnel file was marked sealed by hospital administration, an unprecedented move for a standard employee. Every lead was a dead end. Every door was shut. It was as if Emily had been systematically erased. Why would a hospital go to such lengths to hide a former nurse? The mystery deepened, twisting into something more complex than a simple haunting. It felt like a cover-up. They pushed, they prodded, they threatened subpoenas, until finally, an old, weary hospital administrator, his face etched with a sadness they didn't yet understand, quietly slid a single, dusty file across his desk. "You're not looking for a person," he sighed softly. "You're looking for a memory." The file wasn't an employment record. It was an incident report, thick and heavy with official documents, and scorched at the edges. The date was from 2 years prior. The subject: catastrophic fire, intensive care unit. Miller's breath caught in his throat. It was this very ward. They flipped through pages of technical jargon, damaged assessments, and evacuation protocols until they found it. A list of casualties. And then, a commendation for bravery, attached to a grainy but clear staff photograph. In the photo, a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile looked back at them. Her name tag was clearly visible: Emily Carter, RN. They read the official account, the stark, procedural language failing to mask the horror of that night. An electrical fault, a sudden inferno chaos. The report detailed the evacuation, the heroism of the staff, and then the final, heartbreaking entry. Investigators uncovered the truth. Emily Carter died 2 years ago, saving a patient in the same ICU fire. She had successfully evacuated her assigned patients, but went back into the smoke and flames for one last person, a frightened elderly man trapped by the blaze. She managed to push his bed out into the hallway, into the arms of firefighters, just as a section of the ceiling collapsed. She never made it out. The figure the staff had been seeing wasn't a stranger. It was her. The woman in the photo was undeniably the nurse they had been hearing about for days. Tikine faced the gentle smile. It was all there. She was the guardian angel. Miller and Evans stood in the center of the now quiet. I see the hum of the monitors, a steady, rhythmic pulse. The air no longer felt menacing, but sacred. They weren't investigating a crime or chasing a ghost. They had stumbled upon the lingering echo of a hero's final act of compassion. The mysterious nurse wasn't a threat. She was a promise, a silent vow made in the last moments of her life, still being kept. The spirit of Emily Carter, a nurse to her very core, remind Era in the place she gave her life, still watching over her patients forever. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more. A new sign on the wall reads, Emily Carter Wing. Some heroes never clock out.